There you are. Hey, let's get this show started. Uh-oh.
So, Austin, what'd you think of the opening credits?
Well, I can't believe Sir Steven Spielberg, the grooviest filmmaker in the history of cinema, is making a movie about my life. Very shagadelic, baby, yeah! Having said that, I do have some thoughts.
Really? My friend here thinks it's fine the way it is.
Well, no offense, Sir Stevie, but you gotta have mojo, baby, yeah! Hit it!
Good afternoon, America. Welcome once again to the Meat Potato Show, conservative talk and awesome rock. We are, of course, broadcasting once again down here in the bunker, deep inside liberal enemy territory, bullets whizzing over our head, but we're beating them back with your daily dose of truth and reality. My great guest joined us on December 18th for the Blueprint for Engagement, sat down with Mark Fisher. I was so grateful to have him there on the floor, speaking to the audience. And he's agreed to come on to the Meat and Potato Show this afternoon, and I'm very excited to speak with him. The 2014 United Independence Party Gubernatorial Candidate Evan Falchuk. And we're going to get him right on the air right now. Evan, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for coming on, taking your time. And how are you today?
I'm doing great. I'm glad to be with you.
Great. I'm really excited to have you on. I guess we could call this the continuation of the candidate interviews. I'm going to consider it that. And
Sure.
So the first thing I want to ask you is, what was the impetus? What was that spark that you said to yourself, I got to run for governor, I got to do something? And how was the United Independence Party born out of that? Go ahead.
Well, it started, I've been an entrepreneur. I grew up here in Massachusetts. I've been a business person, and watching the political process over the last number of years in our country has been very dispiriting and worrisome. And it became clear to me as a business person that it was not going to change from within the existing structure. And much like any market where you see companies that are not taking care of their customers, not paying attention to them, not treating them seriously, there's always an opportunity embedded in that somewhere. So what I saw in talking with friends and colleagues and other people was that we could create something. We could create a new platform, a new framework, a new party, a way to challenge the political establishment, to replace it, and to make it representative of the needs and concerns of voters. So from that came the idea of forming the United Independent Party, which we did as an official party on Election Day, November 4th, by earning enough votes to do it. Mm-hmm. And we're off to the races. And to me, this is very much in line with what America has always been about, is that if we don't like how something is, we create something that will be better.
Yeah, exactly.
And we just don't see enough of that in politics. And I feel like I'm doing my part, and all of us are, who helped build the United Independent Party to make it into a reality.
Sure. How was the petition process? Obviously, you had to go to the Secretary of State to file the paperwork and everything. Well, how was that process? Were there any roadblocks? How did that whole thing work out for you?
There were so many roadblocks.
Really?
And there were roadblocks from the beginning. Now, the way it works in Massachusetts, without getting too into the weeds, but I think it's worthwhile to know this, is that you can create something called a political designation by getting 50 people to sign a petition. That is meaningful because that allows you to run for office under that designation. That's how I ran as the United Independent Party candidate for governor. But being a political designation doesn't make you a political party. And being a political party matters a lot because that affects your rules about access to the ballot. Mm-hmm. There's different fundraising rules if you're a party versus not a party. For example, in the governor's race, I was allowed to raise up to $1,500 per person to support my campaign. But if I'd been a Democrat or a Republican, I would have been allowed to raise $15,000 per person per year.
Wow. I wonder why.
I know, exactly. It's amazing when you see it. Those are the kinds of roadblocks that you run into, and you say, "Wow, isn't it amazing that that's how it works in our country?" And here in Massachusetts, we're the cradle of American democracy, but the political parties and the people that support those traditional parties have created rules that keep out competition, that keep out meaningful dialogue from our politics, because it doesn't suit their purposes. So that's why they put those kinds of roadblocks up in the way of what we did in the course of the campaign. And one of the things that happened beyond what were the legal obstacles, of which there were many, was the effort to exclude me from debates. You know, I was in 2 of them, but I was excluded from 3 others, including one in Worcester, where I had been invited by the Worcester Telegram and Gazette and from the Worcester Chamber of Commerce and the NECN, but then they rescinded their invitation.
No way.
You know, so these are the kinds of things that happen. These are the sort of, you could call them dirty tricks. They're kind of lame from the standpoint of dirty tricks. They didn't stop us from getting the votes that we needed to earn that official party status,
right.
And you can't argue with the outcome. You know, we got ourselves to a place where we're here and we're not stopping.
Yeah, what were the numbers finally in the election? What did you guys end up with?
We got almost 72,000 votes.
Yeah,
which is kind of remarkable when you think about the idea that less than 2 years ago, this whole idea of creating a United Independent Party was nothing more than an idea.
that's right.
And that me as a candidate, I was working in a business. I was president of a healthcare company that we grew from 9 employees to 600 employees during my time there. But that's pretty remarkable, and especially given the obstacles that were placed in our way. So now our next goal is to enroll voters. We want to get 50,000 people enrolled in this party over the next year. We're going to be working hard to get some candidates on the ballot in 2016. We want to be a meaningful, permanent force on the Massachusetts political landscape that represents voters and that will speak in real terms about whatever the issue might be. You're going to disagree with it, but at least you're going to know where we stand.
Sure.
We just don't see enough of that.
Sure. Now, all right, 2016, you're going to get some candidates. What offices? What are we talking about here?
Well, legislative races primarily.
Right.
You know, the legislature is up in 2016, so we're looking at legislative races, and the majority of our legislators have been running unopposed.
Right.
In this last election, half the Senate and more than half of the House ran unopposed.
Yep.
It's become the norm in Massachusetts politics, which again is a really bad symptom of what's happening in our democracy generally. And when you see the midterm elections nationally, where voter turnout was the lowest it's been in 72 years, the amount of money being spent in politics is the highest it's probably ever been. And you say, is that a coincidence or is that by design?
No, definitely.
Are these groups that are supporting the traditional political parties and the campaigns of these candidates doing it with a view towards getting as many people out there to vote and to participate in our democracy as possible, or do they want to prevent that? And I believe they want to prevent it.
Of course they do. Of course, yeah. And here's the thing too. Definitely hook me up with some of those candidates. I'd definitely love to talk to them. They'll get equal voice. They'll get a lot of good time. I don't know if you saw any of the videos, and I'm sorry we weren't able to connect last year during the whole candidate interview series. It was really exciting, and it's something that I've been doing for quite some time. And this last year, though, was a real pinnacle. It was a banner year. We had a lot of people. We did the symposium, and then, of course, we followed it up with the debate that you ended up coming to.
Yeah.
And so it was. I'm going to say it. I'm very proud of what I've accomplished doing that, and I think going into this year and going into next year, we're going to really expand it, and I think we're going to give a lot of these candidates. People like you, people like that you're going to put up, and the ones that I've interviewed. Getting back to what you said, these people, they're going to get shut out of the process. They're probably not going to get exposure on the network news that we have here in Massachusetts. They're probably going to get very little radio time or any type of airtime or press coverage, and that's where I come in and doing my own independent thing and doing my own show is to have the conversations like you and I are having right now, where it's organic and it's just I don't play that gotcha game, that pointed question game. I mean, it's so worn out and everybody can see right through it anyway. So it's just so much better just to have a conversation insofar as just giving people an equal shot. What's interesting is, as this race went on, I saw exactly what you had just talked about. People were summarily shut out of debates, summarily shut out of the ballot process, the petition process. It was very tough for these grassroots candidates to come on. And interestingly enough, getting back to my show, I remember when I was on WCUW, I got a lot of heat from the board members there and the managers that you're having too many Republicans on, you're having too many of these Tea Party people on. You've got to get some more Democrats on. Interestingly enough, the Democrats, as much as I put out emails and phone calls, they would never return my emails or phone calls. And then
Sure.
2010 was at a Tea Party event, and I ran into Rachel Brown. And you know who Rachel Brown is, right? From the
Yeah.
LaRouche Democrats. Not only did she come on the show, she came live, and she came like 6 or 7 times throughout 2010. So, of course, my manager wasn't too happy. I said to him, I said, hey, well, I've got some Democrats on. And he just was like shaking his head. But that's the process. I call these Democrats, try to get an equal voice. They want nothing to do with it. I mean, it's a whole power vacuum out there, isn't it?
It is, and there's an entitlement. There's a complacency about that. Why should anybody go talk to people that they don't already agree with? Why should they? And you can see what the calculation is that, well, maybe your listeners aren't going to vote for that candidate anyway in their views, so I'd rather spend my time going somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think that makes much sense. I mean, I think one of the things that I really enjoyed, we had that debate forum, whatever you want to call it, that you guys sponsored with with Mark Fisher. Well, now it's last year, only a few weeks ago. And, that was really good because it was just a real, genuine conversation between
Mm-hmm.
people that care deeply
Mm-hmm.
about whatever the issues are that we were discussing. And we were able to talk about them in a really open way. And the number of people that were there at that event was pretty extraordinary.
Mm-hmm.
It was a very engaged crowd, a very knowledgeable crowd of people.
Yeah.
There's a lot of voters out there
Yeah.
like it. And
Yeah.
I think that the idea the conclusion that some people come to, and I think it's a lazy conclusion, which is that people don't care anymore, is wrong. What's happening is that people are being treated disrespectfully by people in politics.
Mm-hmm.
So not showing up is a form of grave disrespect to the people that you say you want to serve.
Thank you.
And when you see that lack of willingness to engage with people, well, what do you expect? How do you expect people to feel towards you as a political leader if you're not willing to go to places where people don't agree with you?
Sure.
In the course of the gubernatorial race, there were many forums and events like the one that the Worcester Tea Party put on. But done by different groups that had different issues that were important to them. And I have to tell you that most of the time, Mark Fisher was there pretty much always.
Yeah.
In fact, I think he came to every single one. I don't know, but
Yep.
pretty close. And, I would also say that most of the time, the audiences were not especially welcoming to Mark, which I think is disrespectful. But I respected Mark for being there, in spite of the fact that
Certainly.
he was talking about things a lot of people there didn't like.
And I remember. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, and the thing is, for people that are Democrats in Massachusetts, they need to be able to show up to places where maybe they're going to say things like the audience isn't going to like, and they have to be able to not only just take that heat, but learn from it, engage with people. Maybe to make you think about something differently. Maybe you'll become better at describing what it is that your position is. Maybe it'll make you think. It's this sort of radical idea that we should be having real conversations with people that I think has become lost because it's all about, hey, let me hit someone with a soundbite. Let me figure out what's the full tested way to get my my base voters to show up and to hell with any real issues.
Yeah, you'll never see that here on this show. In fact, it's been a foundational principle of the show since I started in 2008, and it's a successful strategy that obviously is winning. I remember when the whole Facebook event page got set up, and I set the page up, and I'm the one that wrote all those questions. And thank you. You made the comment. You said these are really engaging questions. These are questions that should have been asked during the entire election season, and I was really jazzed about that. But the thing that I remember when it became, we were trying to get Don Berwick on. Don Berwick didn't want anything to do with it. So we said, well, let's get Evan on. Let's get Evan. I mean, why not? It's like, let's do it. What was funny is when we switched it and I edited it and I said, yes, Evan Falchuk is coming to join us. You remember, you commented on some of the things. I mean, people just flipped out. It's like, why are you having him on there? What's the matter with you? And I'm sorry, I'm shameless promotion. I was like, yes. awesome, awesome. People are freaking out about it. This is going to be really big. But in the back of my mind, I was thinking to myself, and you just said it, it's so sad that just because you disagree with somebody, what the hell's the problem here? What is wrong with this process? And I was afraid that people aren't going to show up. Now the numbers ended up just going through the roof. And you're right. Once it became very obvious, we were in the grotto there, and I thought, we'll probably have about 20 or 30 people. And it's like, the room will be full, and it'll be okay. No, no, it's just sometimes.
It's standing room only, probably 50, 60 people. I hope everybody bought something.
Oh, of course they did. Of course they did. Of course they did.
So it was great. It was great. And you're right. I mean, it was very engaging. I think one of the cool things about social media is that people tend to think that if you post things that it's kind of sort of anonymous on some level, even if your face is next to it. But what was cool about when you posted the invite and people were getting mad about it, I kind of waded in and got into some conversations with people. And, some people got quiet once they were suddenly faced with the person that they were saying bad things about. But that's the way it should be. Let's engage. Let's not hide. Let's not hide. Let's be brave about whatever it is. If you believe in what you believe in, say so. And I'm happy to have people. I know. I remember there was a fun moment for me, and I enjoyed watching the videos. You posted them in various different places. The audience was really fun. And I got booed on a few things, but it was
that's right.
It was cool. It was a really energetic kind of group of people, and to me, that's the way it ought to be. It wasn't an angry kind of thing. It was like, oh, you're nuts, and it's great. That's good. That's good. That's the way it ought to be.
And we were just I was just at Lear the other night. We did that constitutional debate thing. It was kind of the same thing. Not as many people, but it was the same thing. It was an engaging audience, very intense audience. Some booze, some, bantering back and forth. Every time I go to events like that, I can feel the ghosts of our founders, because that's what they did. That's what they did years ago. They gathered in taverns, they ordered food and drinks, and they bantered, and they argued, and sometimes things might have gotten a little heated. But what ended up happening was the birth of our country and the great political system that we used to have. I want to say the words that we have today, but what we used to have. And this leads me into the next question. The Article 5 and the Constitutional Convention thing, the Convention of States that's going on. Give us your insight on that. What do you guys, you yourself, but also the United Independence Party? What do you think of the Convention of States and the Article 5 thing that's brewing?
Well, I mean, I think that one of the biggest issues that we've got in our country right now is that we've got this idea that money is speech, that the Supreme Court came up with in the Citizens United case, and that's been very disruptive to our democracy. It is limited the extent to which states can make it so that there's an even playing field for people in our politics.
Right.
And every time we see that our government's not responsive to what people want, all you got to do is follow the money. You take a look here in Massachusetts today, right now. They're deciding, maybe by the time this is broadcast, there'll be a decision made on this, but it really doesn't matter. It was decided to submit a bid to bring the Olympics to Massachusetts. And it was done at the behest of some private interests that put up the money for it, but they were able to essentially commit the people of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts to a project that, if we're picked by the U.S. Olympic Committee, is going to change the landscape of Massachusetts in ways that no one voted for. In fact, no one was even asked about this. This just sort of happened. And
I wonder if the convention center has a little bit to do with that too. Is that somehow tied into it? That multi-billion-dollar boondoggle. Go on. I'm sorry.
Story.
Go on.
And so what's happening is the people that give a lot of money, and I'm not talking about the people that give the $15,000. I'm talking about the people that can do $1 million, $2 million, which is who's really driving, our political process. They're not accountable to anybody, and our elected officials are increasingly accountable to those people who are those big money donors. Well, the Citizens United case made it so that there's really nothing that our government can do to prevent these things from happening. Now, you could say they don't want to do anything to prevent these things from happening, and you would be right. I get tired every time I hear, whether it's a Democrat or a Republican, say there's too much money in politics, and then watch as they cash big checks. and don't pass laws to limit it. So I know that the only answer to this is either it is really a constitutional convention. The trouble is, the only two ways to get a constitutional convention is having Congress vote to have an amendment to the Constitution, or to have the states call for the constitutional convention. Since Congress is not going to agree on anything, and certainly not get the president to agree to it, we need to have a constitutional convention to do it. So I support it for the limited purpose of getting rid of super PACs.
You're not afraid of the possibility of a runaway convention? I mean, in 1787, that's what happened. They were supposed to just fix the Articles of Confederation. They ended up tossing it all out. I'm on the camp of against. I'm against the whole idea, and I've written extensively about it, and I've done an interview and video expose about it during last year, and I was at the thing the other night. The big concern on our side is that, what's to stop these people? First of all, Congress doesn't give a two you-know-whats about what we think or what's going on. Also, when the states, when they apply to Congress, and Congress says, okay, we've got the 34 states, now we have to call in Article 5, we have to call the convention. I mean, at that point in time, all bets are off. That's the scare. Congress will shut the door and just make up their own laws and their own rules. And God only knows what they'll end up coming up with. That's my side, but go ahead.
Well, no, I think that's a perfectly reasonable point. I think on the other hand, in the current system we have today, that's happening.
Yeah.
And the system is really badly broken. Now, I happen to think that should 34 states call for a constitutional convention, and one is called, that if there's one thing that elected officials can pay attention to, it's numbers. And if 34 states do that, that would be a pretty significant and obviously an historic thing, because it's never happened before. I don't think that they're going to go and do anything that we would not be able to reverse. And I think that the continuing on the path that we're on right now is worse than the risk that we take by doing something more aggressive about this problem. Our government today is not under our control. Our government today has become completely captured by these interests. The financial services industry on a national level in many ways.
Yeah.
Here in Massachusetts, what's happening with the hospital companies, and which were driving up healthcare costs. This is affecting the bottom line and the wallet of every single person in our Commonwealth. And there's really nothing that our government's going to do to stop it, because they don't want to, our elected officials. Now, we can change it by electing new people, no question about that. And that's sort of in many ways, the bet that we're all taking in creating the United Independent Party is that there is an appetite among voters, for sure, for candidates that want to just talk in real ways about these issues and want to take brave action in spite of what the big money groups will say needs to be done. But the trouble is that the problems that we face structurally are so big that we really need to be having every possible tool out there on the table so we can fix them.
Certainly. And here in Massachusetts, as you had said earlier, that you were only allowed to raise $1,500 per person. The other side is able to raise $15,000 plus or minus. That does strike right direct at the whole Citizens United thing, and that these established political parties, they get to keep their war chest. It's just that people like you're limited, and that's completely unfair. What excites me, though, about this debate is, even though I'm on the side against, believe it or not, and again, I've written about it in some of my exposés, I'm actually of two minds, and only because it is so exciting, it is so interesting, and I'm kind of hoping that, I've read Levin's book, and I've spoken to many people, it's a good idea. I'm just worried about the language, the possibility of them taking things over, and how it's going to affect people in the long run. And if we can get back to, again, your run and some of the other people who were running last year, do you think this growing grassroots movement, because of its power, again, look at what happened on December 18th, and I had said that to the Worcester Telegram and Gazette when they interviewed me, I said, just look at these people, just look at this. This thing is not going away. Is that part of their fear, that they see that it's growing and it's getting bigger, and so that there's this impetus to really try to squash this whole thing? What do you think on that?
Yeah, of course. I mean, this is the way these things always work historically, and historically, it's been a lot easier to squash new movements, new candidates. You know, you cut off their access to money, you cut off their access to media. We broke through so much of that in the course of this election. We worked hard and got a lot of press. Now, a lot of people in politics hide from press because they don't want to answer questions. They don't want to be put on the record. Now, Governor Baker, you know, I remember I mentioned all those different forums. He didn't come to any of them.
That's right.
I think he came to one.
Yeah, where's Charlie? That was always the sign, where's Charlie?
Yeah, so they hide. And, you know, there was a time when you could get away with that. I think that that time is really passing quickly. And voters are increasingly getting their information from places other than the usual sources.
Sure.
Voters that are getting their information from places, whether it's the Boston Globe or the Worcester Telegram and Gazette or other papers, are looking at it with a much more skeptical eye, because they're saying, these people seem too much in bed with each other. I'm not really sure what's actually going on here. And it creates an environment in which this kind of significant change not only is possible, but it actually becomes easier than trying to maintain the status quo. You know, if you had on your program someone trying to argue in favor of the preservation of the existing system and to tell you, look, it's working, it's really working, good luck to them trying to make that argument.
Sure.
You know, so of course they're going to pull out whatever stops they have, but they're less effective than they've ever been. And the different tools of social media, again, think about what you're doing with your program. You're able to have this kind of open-ended conversation about whatever topic you feel like talking about. You've got a lot of people listening and watching to it through various different formats, and this word gets out. This is the kind of stuff, you're absolutely right to mention our, you know, we're sort of the inheritors of the bravery of the people who founded our country. But this, if this kind of technology existed in the 1770s, what we're doing right now would be an act of sedition, you know. And in the context of the
it's already an act of sedition. Exactly. I am on the Obama watch list. It's true. Meat and Potatoes is on the Obama watch list. Don't worry.
There you go. You know, but you know, again,
I must be doing something right.
In the context of the political establishment, doing this kind of stuff is seditious. They don't want you to do this. They don't want you to speak your mind. They don't want you to think. They don't want you to engage in this kind of discussion. You know, the fact that you hosted that event to talk about constitutional convention, which is a topic that there certainly are people out there talking about, but you sure don't hear much of that being discussed in the legislative races in Massachusetts.
No.
I don't think anybody was ever asked that I'm aware of.
Yeah.
You know, would you vote for a thing to do this? Now, I put out a statement saying that I would call for a constitutional convention if I had been elected governor. That's my position, and we could have a really interesting conversation about it. I don't think that Don Berwick's ready to talk about that. I don't think that Martha was ready to talk about it. I think that Charlie was ready to talk about that.
Yeah.
Mark Fisher would have talked about it.
You didn't hear any of it. And I interviewed not only just Massachusetts candidates this year, but I always go nationwide. I always, again, the power of social media. I meet people all across the country. Yeah, nothing. I didn't hear anything. I talked to people from Texas. I talked to a couple of people running for Senate out in Oregon. Nothing. Zero. I talked to a guy in Florida. Zero. Nothing. No, you're right. You're absolutely right.
Those are our elected people. Now, regular people in their lives, they're having those conversations. And the extent to which there's that gap between the people who are our elected officials and the voters themselves, and to the extent that voters can realize, you know what, we're not alone. We're not alone. That's how real important change can happen. There was a very interesting study that came out recently looking at revolutionary movements. And the theory had been that the only way to really bring about a meaningful change in a government was through violent overthrow of the government. And this woman who's a professor at, I forget which school, studied some hundreds of these movements over the last century and has found that violent revolutionary struggle has become less effective, significantly less effective over time as opposed to nonviolent, which was interesting and surprising. And we've seen a lot of these things happening around the world recently, like the Arab Spring and you know, some of the things that were happening in Ukraine prior to the invasion by Russia, and in other places, where these kinds of interesting movements have become successful by people just refusing to buy into the status quo. And what she found statistically was that if just 3.5% of people living in a particular society said, I'm not going to comply, I'm going to be civilly disobeying the system, the system can't stand. And I believe strongly that the United States is ripe for that kind of change, given the extent to which people are talking about these issues. Just like what you were talking about with the Article 5, with your the forum that you had, the discussions that you have on your program, the debate that Mark and I had that you sponsored. These are real conversations with real people. If we have enough of those people realizing they're not alone, the system will not persist.
Sure.
And so that's the opportunity that's in front of us as Americans. We're living in an historic time, and we can make these kinds of changes that will benefit everybody, that will make our democracy actually a democracy again, and will allow us to deal with the issues that we really face.
Well, I look forward to it. I look forward to having you back on the show, getting Mark on the show. I'm, trying to reach out to McCormick, Lively, to all those guys. You're right. This thing's not going away. 2016 has politically, it's right around the corner. So
Yeah.
we're going to be right back into it again. And I'm really, you're right. It's an exciting time to live in the United States, and I'm going to be.
And I'll tell you something else, Chris. This is something that listeners should remember. Think about what may happen in 2016. We might be looking at a Bush-Clinton presidential race. If
Yeah.
there was ever a better advertisement for the need for new democratic change in our country, it's the fact that we're repeating elections that we've already had.
That's right.
The system isn't working, but this is all it keeps generating.
That's a great line. That's a great line. We're repeating elections we've already had. Evan, that is priceless, and that's the line right there of the show. Evan, I want to thank you so much, my good man. Thank you so much for coming on. I look forward to future conversations. What's in it for you, though, this year? What are your plans for this year? You told us about the United Independence Party and putting up legislators and stuff like that.
Yep.
For you, what's up for you?
I got into this because I believe we need to have this framework and structure in place. I've been asked this question about what's in it for me from the beginning when I announced.
No, I mean, what is your plan? What's your game plan? What do you want to do next?
Well, I want to see us get 50,000 people enrolled in this party this year. And people can go to unitedindependent.org. They can read what we're about. They can download the form. I want to get those people enrolled. I want every town clerk in Massachusetts to see hundreds of forms coming in telling them that they want to enroll, stand with us with the United Independent Party. I want to keep building out the platform and organizing people around this cause. We've been starting to have our first organizing meetings. We just this week had our first one down in the South Shore in Weymouth. We've got more coming up in Western Mass, Central Mass, really all across the state. Get people organized and mobilized towards this kind of positive change. And my role in that is to help facilitate it, help raise money for it, help turn it into something that's a permanent part of the political landscape here in Massachusetts, and connect with like-minded people around the country to bring about the kind of entrepreneurial effort in politics that we see in every other industry, in every other business in our country. It gets disrupted by innovation and entrepreneurship. We need to see that in politics.
Excellent, excellent. And you have an open invitation. Bring those people on. Ladies and gentlemen, my great guest, Evan Falchuk from the United Independence Party, 2014 gubernatorial candidate. Man, thanks a lot. You have a good day, Evan.
All right, thanks a lot. Take care.
Thank you. Well, there you go, folks.